At 6 in the morning, I yelled from downstairs, "Sarah, Sarah, get down here." I came to her room and got the ironing board up when my mother-in-law called me. I struggled to process what she was doing here. She was a town nearby, as in, I was just like, well now, what the hell is she doing? My hands were shaking. But now you start to talk to her on the phone, and so that, cool, but then at some point in time, you see this girl face to face. I cried back to her, coming mother. As I went down, she roamed every room of the house with a proud face on. "What kind of a mess is this? You call this a home?" she bellowed as she kicked anything that got in her way, headed for it. "Ah, it's cool," I replied. "Fine. I must get out. Why should my son have to live like this? Heck, you can clean right. You're useless," she continued. Before I could answer, she chucked a dried flower from across the room, and it hit me in the face. "What even is that? Is that a flower? You cannot even water it." "Mom, I was busy with work." "I know, but is that an excuse for you not to clean the house? You only have two things to do: work and clean, and you cannot even do great in both. Worthless." She snarled at me. I was controlling my emotions, but I could hardly take it anymore. My tears were slowly falling when my husband came down, wearing the suit that I had ironed. "My love, it's half done," I said as I went close to him and touched his suit. It was not done yet, but he pushed me so hard that I stumbled and scratched my arms on the coffee table behind me. "I'm already late and you're moving so slowly. You're such a slacker. You don't get things done around here. Idiot," he shouted. "I'm sorry, your mother called me," I tried to explain. "Oh, and now it's my mother's fault. If you had woken up earlier, my suit could have been ironed on time. My love, you know that I did the midnight shift earlier at the store. I have to work overtime for us to pay this month's rent." David slammed the wall, and it startled me. "Enough with your excuses. That's the price you pay for dropping out of college. You don't have a decent job that can provide for us. Don't stress yourself out, son. That is no good for you. Just remember that today is going to be a big day, and soon you will get out of this hellhole," his mother said, whispering to David as she calmed him. They left me right there and then, without any words of goodbye. I heaved a deep sigh. If only you had a job, we would live a comfortable life. But here you are, a jobless, spoiled, and abusive little prick that relies on his wife for money. And if only you didn't have a tolerating and inconsiderate mother, then all of us would live happily with no toxicity, I thought to myself. These are the words that I wanted to tell him and his mother straight to their faces, but I didn't have the guts. Even now, I could feel my knees shaking. I quickly cleaned the house and left for work. While driving to the office, I remembered my husband's words earlier. I dropped out of college to marry him because he got me pregnant. He hesitated to ask for my hand initially because he wanted an easy life, friends, parties, and lots of trouble. But my mother insisted that we marry each other to save our family's reputation. With that, we got married at the early age of 21. The first few months of our relationship were beautiful as we were expecting a fantastic baby girl. But I had a miscarriage, and right then, my husband started to change. Now, 2 years into our marriage, we were not blessed with another baby anymore. Ever since, I have been the only one that worked. My husband would stay in the house, watching football games and eating his heart out. He also complained most of the time, and more frequently, he hurt me whenever I tried to wrestle with him or when I started to prove a point. I was so busy that I could only remember the worst fight we had. "What is wrong with you? Why are you hitting me?" I had asked. "You were so useless. I asked for 10 oranges and you brought me 2. Are you that dumb? You don't know how to count," David shouted. David, for the love of God, I'm not buying $15 worth of perfectly ripened oranges. You know exactly how close to the bone we live. You are 2 months overdue with rent, and you request I purchase oranges. Now, due to you thinking I'm a penny pincher, for reasons still unknown, you're mad at me. He held my hair and then dropped me to the ground. He broke whatever lay on the table next to him. You are not to defy me. I'm your husband, and you follow me, he yelled. He drop-kicked me, and I fell to the ground, writhing. My coworker then slapped me back into reality, because I honestly thought that entering the office was something to come and not already done. "Hi, Sarah. Are you fine? You are chewing and zoning out," she said. I resisted the urge to crumple in pain and answered with an I'm all right. "What happened to your arm? Did he hurt you again?" I was shocked by her comment. No, I slipped on the floor and hit my arm against a table by accident. "I'm okay, and fine." I had to argue back at her accusations. I knew she was family with my husband. It was not the first time she had checked me on that. "Sarah, honey," she said after coming up to me and grabbing my hand, "your husband is beating you. You should not have to deal with this crap. You have to take action." "No, Mia. He is my husband and I'm not leaving him. I never did dream of escaping, not until I was adult, and then my thoughts always went to, how will it look for the family once leave him?" Maya sighed. There was nothing she could do. I refused to listen and began working hard. As night and day, I reached back home. He's going to work overtime and found out he made my mother-in-law angry, so I skipped the second job. Meal prepped dinner because, well, whatever she said hurt hubby pump butt. Then I saw my mother-in-law reading a book as she sat on our couch, and I cried. She looked composed and honestly happy. "Good evening, Mom. Where's David?" I asked. "Oh, stop looking for David and you will not call me Mom any longer," she answered. So of course I put her on the spot. "Oh, well, what do you mean?" I asked. Her response did not come right away. She whipped out something, but instead of keys or her phone it was an unmarked white envelope. Then she poured it on me and everything spilled out onto the floor. "Money." I sat there in disbelief. "That's for your troubles." I looked at the money on my floor. I knelt down and began to gather back all the money into an envelope. "What is all this for?" She grabbed me forcefully by the chin that had startled me. It was painful. Raising my chin and obliterating her gaze with mine, she said, "Take this money and leave my son alone. He is to marry a wealthy girl, the daughter of a politician, a complete opposite of a worthless person like you. Now take this money, and I'll file the divorce papers or disappear from our lives and forget that the wedding happened." I stared back at her. "I will not do that." She chuckled. "Oh, really? You were dead in love with my son, huh? Well, sorry to burst your bubble. My son loathes you. You're the reason why he is trapped in your stupid, boring life. You lured him into this prison." With every word she said, she gripped harder, making it more painful every second. "That is not true. You're just clouding his judgment. I did everything to provide for this family, and now I'm the bad guy. You're so funny and pathetic. Of course, you must provide because you dragged my son into this. No matter what it takes, Rick will marry that girl he met at the party. He deserves to be with the wealthiest and most influential people in town. He does not deserve a girl like you. You can go back to your lowly life at the farm and be with your loser mother." She slapped me so hard in the face that I almost lost consciousness. Before she could even get out of the house, I approached her. "Don't ever talk to my mother that way." She laughed and looked at me from head to toe. "Look at you. You're a complete mess, just like your mother. I remember how she begged for my son to marry you to save your reputation, but in fact, it had already been ruined by you. You were just like your mother, dumb and hopeless." I could feel my hands shaking. I was about to slap her when she caught my hand. "And now you're going to hit me? You're so pathetic. I will sue you if you even try to lay a hand on me. You are the one who deserves to be sued. I will never let you get away with insulting my mother and abusing me. Oh, so you are brave now, huh?" She pushed me, and I fell right onto the floor again. Be thankful because David's new wife is very generous to give you that sum of money as compensation for your troubles and as our token of gratitude for giving her your husband. Just stay away from our lives. I couldn't think straight anymore. I was angry and in so much pain. Please let me talk to David. She shut the door so loud that I started to panic. When I tried to call my husband, he would not answer. I messaged him through his every account, but he was not replying. Meantime, I found out that all the money I had saved in my bank account, he withdrew it. I bawled my eyes out when I got back and saw that remaining balance reached 0. This is so unfair. They left me with nothing. That night, I became intoxicated in alcohol. David had, after all, abused me and hated my guts, but at one stage we were happy, weren't we? By the time we lost our daughter, he was even worse. This is still the man who respected, spoke to, and touched me with love and compassion. But now, it's all gone. I texted my mom everything that happened. In the morning, she found me on my floor of my bedroom. "Sarah, OMG, what happened to you? Crucify," she said as she got me to stand up and tucked into my bed. And as I saw my aging mom take a towel with warm water to clean me, I started crying. My heart ached for her. She just wanted me to be my best self, and I only ever got in her way. I also recalled the words that my mother-in-law spoke to her, and it made me want to die even more. "Mom, I'm so sorry." "Hush now," she kept repeating over and over, in a voice cracking with each syllable. "This is not your fault. Relax, sweetheart, you're okay now. Mommy is here. I will never leave you." Her tears threatening to form as she caressed my face. I bowed my head and felt her warm caress against me. My mother is the kindest person ever, and to listen such words from somebody else makes me mad. But my mom said it in the most soothing way. She cared for me that day. She prepared as well my favorite meal and did not leave me alone till I see what crossed in my mind. "Mom, I know where they went." My mother, looking a bit confused. "What do you mean?" "I think they went to Uncle Matthew's party." I saw my mother's eyes widen. "Uncle Matthew is my rich uncle. He is my maternal uncle, and I want to relate his business, which is the housing company." As fate would have it, my mother took the unplanned step of getting married to Dad, who is nothing short of a peasant, and those boots separated. "Are you sure?" "Yeah, I think some guy in the office mentioned it to me, but oh well. Same thing as before, my gut just knew." I ran to my husband's mess and located an XO in the invite. It had my name on it. It was meant for me. I showed it to my mother, and she gasped. "We have not been forgotten by your uncles, people." Then the invite opened, but had a note on it. "Sarah, my dearest niece and heir, and dearest sister, do bring Mom. I longed for her every day." I dropped to the ground down in disbelief. My mom just stood there in disbelief. "Matthew is setting you up to be his successor." The call, they even tried to keep it from me. Anna and David conspired against me. IHADAPRTYTHRTHEN. Enough of that now. Or we can take things into our own hands. Mom wasted no time contacting the number on the invite. She identified herself as Uncle Matthew's sister, and to our surprise, the transference of pure joy from her brother through Sari could be felt in every staff member over speakerphone. "Madam Susan, we have been expecting your response to us. Our envoy is over there to you as we speak." My heart almost stopped. The fact that all of this was true blew my mind. My mother was crying so hard. I wondered if Matthew had already forgotten about me. He never spoke to me again for 23 years. Your father died too, so I was hoping to be able for him. Bootstrapped. Next thing I knew, a car pulled up in our driveway. Our move, and it took us to my uncle's place. Once inside, my mother sobbed as Uncle sprinted towards her with his arms wide open and hugged her so tight. Both of them were crying in one another's arms, and hen with me, he gave a hug and landed some kisses on my head. He spoke softly as he said, "I'm so sorry it took me this long to find the two of you. You were never late, Matthew. Now you stay here with me. We are family and we're supposed to be together. That day changed the course of my life and that of my mother. My uncle took us in and he provided everything we needed. I went back to school the next weekend and Mom ran his deal with him. A month went by and I settled into a comfortable life. I would find myself thinking about David from time to time. Someone knocked on my door and I finally woke the fuck up. Come in. Hello, Miss Sarah. Your mother wants me to come and give you a cup of coffee. One of my uncle's maids finally came with some gauze and a small first aid kit toward the end. Thank you, Claire, I smiled. She edged a bit closer to me, and then before she left completely looked back at my laptop like it had more business with her. Forgive my asking, Miss Sarah, do you happen to have a husband? At this, I laughed a little. Yes, I had, but he left me in the gentlest manner. I see. We are so delicate with our hearts, men, for God's sake, see how much they hurt us. But you are also looking familiar to me, madam. I think I saw you somewhere. Maybe. I have a couple jobs that I do. Maybe you've seen me doing one of them. She noted and smiled at me. I shall leave then. I must be bothering you, Miss Sarah. Thank you. I smiled back at her. After she was out, I get a text message from the person I hate most, her mother-in-law. David is filing the divorce papers now. We'll even do appeal with the money for you to hire a lawyer, really. It will be paid for by his latest wife. Be grateful and do your job. And Faye, do us a favor. My heart was pierced. I breathed in deeply and thought of all the silver linings that followed once David was out of my life. Maybe it was meant to happen. I cock-blocked and stopped responding to her texts. Dinner came, and I could sense my uncle's uneasiness. Is there something wrong, Matthew? The company lost funds today from an unknown user. Someone must have gone inside our account and stolen the money. Good thing I already have it covered, and experts are starting to track down the culprit. A glass fell to the floor and broke. I saw Claire swiftly pick up the shards. I'm so sorry. I'll clean this immediately. I could sense the nervousness in her voice. I felt bad for her. The next day, I received another message from my mother-in-law. Stupid girl, meet us at Pitt's restaurant. You're going to sign these papers now. If you don't show yourself, I will do everything to ruin your life. I had no choice but to meet them. As I was about to leave, I remembered Claire. I pitied her last night, and I wanted to give her something, some cash so that she could give herself a break. I looked for her, but the other maid said she went out for lunch with friends. Maybe I'll treat her tomorrow then, I whispered to myself. With that, I headed to the restaurant. The moment I saw my mother-in-law, and even just my husband's back profile, I was already shaking. Also, a familiar silhouette of a girl caught my attention. She was sitting next to David. I went closer to them, and I was in complete shock when I saw the girl's face. I stared at her. And you're finally here. Being late is also one of your worthless traits, isn't it? You have no manners, and you kept us all waiting, especially Madame Claire. You have no shame. We're doing you a favor here. We are making your life easier. You have a huge sum of money now, so sit down and sign the damn papers, or I'll sue. It's you. I interrupted my mother-in-law's speech. I gave Claire a blank stare, ignoring my mother-in-law and husband. How dare you interrupt me? You're the one who steals our company's money, and for the record, you're the one who stole my husband. I could not control my temper anymore, and I shouted at her. My mother-in-law got up and slapped me in the face. You lost your mind. How dare you yell at Madame Claire and disrespect her? And what company are you talking about? You're talking nonsense, you poor brat. I slammed the table and got up. The next time you lay a hand on me, you'll be in jail. The girl right here is my uncle's maid, and she stole his money so that she could pose as a rich young girl, when in fact she's actually serving me. I'm the heir of my uncle's company, and now I can even buy this restaurant right here and then. You're the one who is disrespecting me. The three of them stared at me in shock. I will turn the three of you into the police. I have both evidence. You slapped me in the face, and all of these people here are witnesses. It will fortify your abuses toward me. And you, Claire, you have already confessed, and you will be convicted as a thief." My mother-in-law fell to her knees and begged for mercy. My husband came to me and tried to hold my hands, but I shrugged him off. "The two of you treated me like I was so low, like I was nothing but a dumb and worthless girl. Now it's time for both of you to learn your lessons the hard way." Claire also cried her eyes out until the authorities came and arrested the three of them. My mother and uncle came inside the restaurant and rushed toward me. "My uncle will take over the legal actions. He assured us that justice will be served for all the mistreatments they gave us." And on that day, my mother-in-law, husband, and maid cried for mercy, but it was silenced by the loudness of their mistakes.
During our 10th anniversary dinner at the fancy Italian restaurant downtown, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off with Nolan. His smiles seemed forced, and he kept glancing at his phone whenever it buzzed in his pocket. A tiny crease formed between his eyebrows, like he was anxious about something. "Everything okay?" I asked, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. The candlelight flickered in his brown eyes as he looked up. "Yeah, of course. Just work stuff. You know how it is." Nolan flashed me a reassuring grin, but I could tell he was holding something back. As we dug into our plates of linguine alla vongole, I tried to push the nagging feeling aside and enjoy the evening. Nolan and I had been together for over a decade, since we met in college. Back then, we were just two kids dreaming of building a life together in Seattle. Now, at 35, I was living that dream. A cozy house in the suburbs, a fulfilling job as an elementary school teacher, and a kind, loving husband who worked at a tech firm downtown. We didn't have kids yet, but we were comfortable and happy, or so I thought. Nolan reached for the bottle of Chianti to refill his glass, his third of the night. "To us," he said, raising his glass with a tight smile. 10 years down, forever to go." I clinked my glass against his, trying to ignore the way his eyes kept darting to his phone. Maybe I was just being paranoid. Nolan loved me, didn't he? But as the nights turned into weeks of his increasingly distant behavior, those niggling doubts only grew stronger. I couldn't ignore the truth any longer. Something was very wrong in my perfect little world. "Maybe he's just going through a phase," Cora said over coffee one morning, her brow furrowed with concern. "Men can be like that sometimes, get distant when they're stressed about work or whatever." I shook my head, staring into the depths of my latte. "It's more than that, Cora. You should see how he is at home these days." Nolan had been coming home later and later from the office, his smiles growing forced by the day. We barely spoke anymore, and when we did, it felt like pulling teeth to get more than one-word answers out of him. "He's constantly on his phone, typing away furiously whenever I leave the room," I confided. "And the other night, when I suggested we go out for our usual date night, he just mumbled some excuse about having to work late." Cora reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry you're going through this. Have you tried talking to him about it?" A bitter laugh escaped my lips. "You think I haven't? Every time I bring it up, he just brushes me off, says he's been swamped at work and that it's nothing to worry about." But I knew better. Call it a wife's intuition, but deep down, I could sense that something was seriously wrong in our marriage. The Nolan I fell in love with, the caring, attentive man who used to dote on me, was slowly slipping away, replaced by this cold, distant stranger. That evening, I decided to try one more time. As Nolan sat on the couch, scrolling mindlessly on his phone, I approached him. "Nolan, we need to talk." My voice was steady, but my heart pounded in my chest. He glanced up, his expression unreadable. "About what?" "About us. Our marriage." I took a deep breath. "I can't help but feel like you've been pulling away lately, and I want to know why." For a moment, he just stared at me, his jaw clenched. Then, with a heavy sigh, he set his phone down. "It's just been really stressful at work, Lila. You know how demanding my job can be." I crossed my arms, unconvinced. "That's not a good enough excuse, and you know it. We're supposed to be partners, remember? For better or worse. But lately, it feels like you've checked out of our marriage completely." Nolan ran a hand through his hair, frustration etched onto his face. "Look, I'm trying my best here, okay? Cut me some slack." "Some slack?" I repeated, my voice rising. "Nolan, I deserve better than this. We deserve better than what you've been giving our marriage. His lips pressed into a thin line, and for a split second I saw something flicker in his eyes. Guilt, perhaps. But as quickly as it came, it was gone, replaced by a cold, detached expression. "Maybe you're right," he muttered, standing up abruptly. "Maybe this isn't working anymore." And with that, he grabbed his keys and walked out the door, leaving me standing there in stunned silence, feeling like the ground had been ripped out from under me. A few weeks later, Nolan's company was hosting a big gala event to celebrate some major client wins. As his wife, I was expected to attend and play the part of the doting partner. Despite the growing rift between us, I agreed, hoping it might be a chance for us to reconnect. The venue was a swanky downtown hotel, and I had picked out a sleek black dress that hugged my curves just right. If Nolan wasn't going to make an effort, at least I could look good for myself. As we mingled with Nolan's colleagues and their partners, I plastered on a fake smile, making small talk about work and the weather. Nolan stuck close by my side, but his eyes kept drifting across the room, like he was searching for someone. That's when I spotted her. A tall, slender woman with long chestnut hair cascading over her bare shoulders. Her red dress clung to her body like a second skin, leaving little to the imagination. She was laughing at something a man had said, throwing her head back in an exaggerated gesture. Nolan's gaze locked onto her, and I felt a pang of recognition. This woman looked vaguely familiar, but I couldn't quite place her. Before I could ponder it further, the woman's eyes met Nolan's, and she excused herself from her conversation partner. My heart sank as she began sauntering over to us, a predatory gleam in her eyes. "Nolan," she purred, resting a perfectly manicured hand on his arm. "I've been looking for you all night." He cleared his throat, shifting uncomfortably. "Ivy, this is my wife, Lila. Lila, this is Ivy Richardson. She's a new project manager at the company." My smile froze on my face as realization hit me like a punch to the gut. So this was the woman Nolan had been messaging constantly. I was sure of it. Ivy's eyes raked over me with thinly veiled disdain. "Charmed, I'm sure," she drawled, making no effort to hide her contempt. "Likewise," I managed to choke out, my grip tightening around my champagne flute. Nolan laughed nervously, oblivious to the charged tension between us. "Well, you two should get to know each other better. Ivy's been doing great work on the Henderson account." "Is that so?" I asked through gritted teeth, shooting daggers at Ivy with my eyes. She smirked, running her hand slowly down Nolan's arm. "We've certainly been working closely together on a lot of things." The insinuation in her tone was undeniable, and a sickening realization washed over me. My husband, my Nolan, was having an affair with this vile, shameless woman right under my nose. I opened my mouth to unleash the torrent of fury building inside me, but Nolan cut me off. "Actually, I was just about to grab us some drinks from the bar. Can I get you anything, Ivy?" His voice was laced with a strange eagerness that made my skin crawl. "A dirty martini would be lovely," Ivy purred, her hand lingering on Nolan's arm for a beat too long. As he hurried off towards the bar, I rounded on Ivy, my face flushed with rage. "I don't know what kind of sick game you're playing here, but let me make one thing crystal clear. Nolan is my husband, and if you think you can just swoop in and steal him away, you've got another thing coming." Ivy tossed her hair over her shoulder, utterly unfazed by my outburst. "Oh, sweetie, the only one playing games here is your dear husband. But by all means, keep deluding yourself into thinking you actually mean something to him." Her words cut deeper than any knife, and I had to fight back the urge to slap that smug grin right off her face. Instead, I clenched my fists, trying to rein in my emotions. "You're going to regret this," I hissed through clenched teeth. "I'll make sure of it." Ivy let out a mocking laugh. Empty threats from a sad, pathetic woman. How deliciously tragic. She turned on her heel and sauntered away, leaving me seething and humiliated in the middle of the crowded ballroom. As Nolan rejoined me, oblivious to what had just transpired, I felt a cold, hard knot of determination form in the pit of my stomach. If it was war she wanted, then war was what she'd get. I would make Ivy regret the day she ever laid eyes on my husband. In the days following the gala, I barely slept or ate. My mind was consumed by the image of Ivy's hand trailing down Nolan's arm, her voice dripping with smugness as she all but admitted to their affair. The betrayal burned like acid in my veins. I needed proof. Solid, undeniable evidence that I could shove in Nolan's face and make him see the truth. Maybe then some small part of the man I loved would resurface and put an end to this madness. So one night, as Nolan snored lightly beside me, I reached over and snatched his phone off the nightstand. My hands trembled as I tapped in his passcode, our anniversary date, a bitter irony. The phone unlocked, revealing a flurry of messages from a contact simply labeled IR. My heart pounded as I opened the thread. There it was, in black and white. Hundreds of messages between Nolan and Ivy, some innocuous but many far too intimate for mere colleagues. "Can't wait to see you tonight, handsome. You looked incredible at the party. That dress left little to the imagination. I miss the feeling of your lips on mine." White-hot rage seared through me as I read their shameless exchanges. This was so much worse than I'd imagined, a full-blown emotional affair at the very least. Bile rose in my throat, but I forced myself to keep reading, taking screenshots to document the evidence. I needed ammunition for the war that was about to come. As I scrolled further back in time, my blood ran cold at one particular message from Nolan. "You're right, I do need to end things with Lila. This has gone too far, and she deserves better than living a lie." My hands went numb, nearly dropping the phone. He'd been planning to leave me, to discard me like a piece of trash for that vile succubus Ivy. A choked sob escaped my lips before I could stop it. Nolan stirred beside me. "Lila?" he mumbled groggily. "What's wrong?" I turned to face him, tears streaming down my cheeks, clutching his phone like a lifeline. "How could you?" I whispered hoarsely. "How could you do this to me, to us?" His eyes went wide as he took in the phone, panic flashing across his features. "Lila, I can explain." "Explain what?" I spat, anger eclipsing my hurt. "That you've been carrying on an affair with that woman behind my back? That you were going to leave me for her?" Nolan opened and closed his mouth, at a loss for words. Pathetic. "I loved you," I choked out, my voice thick with emotion. "I gave you everything. And this is how you repay me?" He surged forward, reaching out as if to embrace me. "Baby, please, it's not what it looks like." But I recoiled from his touch, holding up the phone defiantly. "Don't you dare try to deny it, Nolan. I have all the proof I need right here." His face crumpled in resignation as he slowly sank back onto the bed. "I'm so sorry," he whispered brokenly. "I never meant to hurt you." I let out a bitter laugh, swiping at the tears on my cheeks. "Well, you did. You hurt me more than you'll ever know." As I turned and stormed out of the bedroom, clutching the phone with the damning evidence, a newfound sense of purpose burned within me. If Nolan thought he could just toss me aside and ride off into the sunset with his mistress, he had another thing coming. I was done being the victim. It was time to plan my revenge. Armed with the incriminating evidence from Nolan's phone, I knew I had to confront him and Ivy directly. No more dancing around the issue. It was time to blow this sordid affair wide open. A few days later, I marched into Nolan's office building downtown, my heels clicking determinedly against the marble floors. The security guard eyed me warily as I blazed past the reception desk. "Ma'am, you can't just go up there," he called out, but I ignored him, stabbing the button for the elevators. When I stepped out onto Nolan's floor, I spotted him immediately through the glass walls of his office. He was bent over his desk, completely engrossed in whatever was on his computer screen. Ivy was there too, perched on the edge of his desk in a tight skirt that rode dangerously high up her thighs. She leaned in close as they pored over the documents together, her chest practically spilling out of her blouse. White-hot fury licked at my insides as I watched their intimate display. Gripping the manila envelope containing the printed text messages, I stormed over and flung the door open with a bang. Nolan's head snapped up, his eyes widening in shock and fear. "Lila, what are you doing here?" Ivy simply raised an immaculately groomed eyebrow, her lips curling into a disdainful smirk. Well, if it isn't the little wife." I leveled my gaze at her, jaw clenched. "Save it, you home-wrecking snake. I know all about your sordid little affair with my husband." Reaching into the envelope, I pulled out the printouts and flung them onto Nolan's desk, the papers fluttering across the surface. Nolan went deathly pale as he scanned the indisputable evidence. "How did you—" "Does it matter?" I seethed, rounding on him. "What matters is that you've been lying and cheating on me this entire time." I turned back to Ivy, who was examining her manicured nails with a bored expression. And you make me sick, preying on my husband like some cheap, shameless hussy. A mocking laugh bubbled from her lips. Oh, feisty. I can see why Nolan's so smitten. She traced a finger along Nolan's arm, her touch lingering just a beat too long. Isn't that right, handsome? My blood boiled at her taunting words. In that moment, something inside me snapped. Before I could stop myself, I lunged forward and slapped Ivy clear across the face, the sound reverberating through the office like a gunshot. You bitch! She shrieked, clutching her stinging cheek. Her perfectly coiffed hair was mussed, mascara smudged under her eyes. You're gonna regret that. Nolan leapt to his feet, grabbing my arms to restrain me. Lila, stop! You're causing a scene. But I wasn't finished. Adrenaline coursed through my veins as I wheeled on him next. No, you stop! I shouted, shoving him away from me. This is the only way either of you snakes will listen. I want a divorce, Nolan. This marriage is over. He froze, his expression crumpling. For a fleeting second, I thought I saw remorse flicker in his eyes. Lila, please, he started, reaching out imploringly, but I cut him off with a cold, steely glare. You made your bed, Nolan. Now you can lie in it, with her. I jabbed an accusing finger at Ivy, whose cheeks were still flushed with outrage. As I turned on my heel and stormed out, I could hear the shocked murmurs of Nolan's coworkers who had witnessed the whole sordid scene. But I didn't care. The cheating liars had been exposed, and soon they'd face the consequences of their despicable actions. My quest for revenge was only just beginning. In the days following my explosive confrontation with Nolan and Ivy, I found myself surprisingly calm. The initial storm of anger and betrayal had passed, replaced by a steely determination to make them pay for what they'd done. I may have lost my husband, but I hadn't lost my self-respect. And I'd be damned if I let those two schemers just ride off into the sunset without facing any consequences. So I devised a plan, a deliciously devious scheme that would hit them where it hurt most, their reputations and their pocketbooks. First, I gathered even more evidence, documenting every instance of Nolan's misconduct that violated his company's ethics policies. The misuse of corporate resources for his dalliances with Ivy, the inappropriate relationships, the blatant lies on his expense reports to cover up their escapades. I compiled it all into a tidy file, complete with copies of those damning text messages, ready to present to his boss and the HR department. Next, I dug deeper into Ivy's background, searching for any skeletons in her closet that could be used as leverage. As it turned out, the sleazy homewrecker had quite a few secrets of her own. Like the fact that she was carrying on not just with my husband, but with another married executive at the company too. Or how about those shady business dealings with a former client that had led to a nasty lawsuit? I gathered all the sordid details and incriminating documents, preparing to leak them to the press and Ivy's unsuspecting partner at just the right moment. With everything in place, I decided to lull my prey into a false sense of security first. I started being overly friendly with Nolan again, pretending I was finally ready to forgive and move on. Lila, I'm so sorry, he blubbered during one of our clandestine meetups at a cafe near his office. What I did was inexcusable, but I want to make things right. I still love you. I gave him my most radiant smile, pulling his hands into mine. I know, baby, and I love you too. That's why I'm willing to give our marriage another chance. He seemed stunned by my apparent change of heart, but too desperate and pathetic to question it. Over the next few weeks, I let him think we were working through the hurt and rebuilding our trust, all the while compiling more proof of his indiscretions behind the scenes. Ivy, for her part, seemed utterly convinced that she'd won. The smug look she shot me whenever our paths crossed said it all. Little did either of them know, I was simply luring them into my carefully laid trap. Everything was going according to plan. Finally, when I had enough ammunition to bury them both, I started planting little seeds here and there. An anonymous email to Ivy's partner with details of her affairs, a copied file mysteriously left on her boss's desk at work. At first, they brushed it off as someone's attempt at a sick joke. But slowly, the dominoes began to fall into place around them. Ivy started facing whispers and stares everywhere she went, as the news of her transgressions spread like wildfire. Clients began dropping her company left and right, the too disgusted by her unethical behavior. Nolan, meanwhile, found himself being summoned into endless meetings with HR and the executives as each new piece of evidence against him came to light. His desperate pleas of innocence fell on increasingly deaf ears. They say the best revenge is living well. But there's also a particular satisfaction in being the architect of your enemy's downfall, watching every last piece of their lives crumble around them because of their own vile misdeeds. As Ivy and Nolan began to drown in the tsunami of consequences they'd brought upon themselves, I stood back and observed with a dark, triumphant smile. The cheating liars were getting exactly what they deserved, and it was all thanks to the deliciously devious scheme I'd executed to perfection. As the fallout from my meticulously planned revenge scheme intensified, it was almost comical to witness Ivy and Nolan's lives unraveling before their eyes. Ivy's entire world came crashing down in spectacular fashion. Word of her affairs with multiple married executives spread like wildfire, earning her a reputation as a home-wrecking pariah. Clients dropped her firm left and right, disgusted by her unethical behavior. Even her own partner wasn't spared from the shockwaves. After receiving those anonymous emails detailing Ivy's indiscretions, he promptly kicked her out and filed for divorce, leaving her with nothing. I'll never forget the look on her face when she showed up at my doorstep one evening, tears of makeup streaking her cheeks. "You did this," she choked out, hatred burning in her eyes. "You ruined everything." I simply gave her a cold, triumphant smile. "I warned you not to mess with me, Ivy. You reap what you sow." With a guttural scream of rage, she lunged at me, hands outstretched like claws, but I was ready, sidestepping her attack with ease. "Save it," I spat as she crashed against the doorframe. "You've already lost. Now get out of my sight before I call the cops." Ivy slunk away in humiliated defeat, her life in utter ruins because of her own despicable actions. Karma, as they say, is a bitch. As for Nolan, well, let's just say he didn't fare much better. Turns out his cozy tech company had a very strict no fraternization policy that he'd blatantly violated. Strike one. Then there were all those expense reports he'd falsified to cover up his and Ivy's little rendezvous, using corporate funds for personal dalliances. Strike two. When the higher-ups received that anonymous file detailing every last instance of misconduct, ethics breach, and company policy violation, they didn't take it lightly. Strike three, you're out. Nolan was promptly fired and faced with a mountain of damning evidence that could potentially lead to legal troubles, all because he couldn't keep it in his pants. He came crawling to me one evening, a sniveling, pathetic mess desperate for my forgiveness and support. As if. "Lila, please," he blubbered, clutching the manila envelope of termination papers. "I've lost everything because of my stupid mistakes. My job, my reputation, it's all gone. You have to help me." I fixed him with a cold, steely glare, fighting back the urge to spit in his face. "The only one who has to do anything here is you," I stated flatly. "You need to sign those divorce papers and get the hell out of my life for good." Nolan's jaw dropped in stunned disbelief. But I thought we were working things out? You said you forgave me." A harsh laugh tore from my throat. "You're even dumber than you look if you actually believed that load of crap." Reaching into my purse, I pulled out a crisp folder and tossed it at his feet, the contents spilling across the floor, copies of every last text between him and Ivy, evidence of his corporate violations, you name it. "That's just a taste of all the proof I gathered while I was pretending to take you back," I said, watching realization slowly dawn over his stupid, cheating face. "Everything you've lost, your job, your money, your precious Ivy, it's all because of your own sickening behavior. I just gave you the consequences you deserved." Nolan's mouth opened and closed like a gasping fish as he processed the magnitude of what I'd done. You planned this whole thing? All of it?" I leveled him with a look of pure disdain. "You're damn right I did. I told that snake Ivy she was going to regret the day she messed with me, and I meant it. Now here we are, and you're both getting exactly what you deserve. To lose everything, just like I did when you betrayed me." With a look of utter devastation, Nolan slumped to his knees, cradling his head in his hands as racking sobs shook his body. But I felt no pity whatsoever, only a deep sense of satisfaction that karmic justice had been served. Months later, as the crisp autumn air turned to the bitter chill of winter, I could finally begin to breathe again. The deep wounds left by Nolan's betrayal were starting to heal over, leaving me stronger and more resilient than ever before. I'd moved out of our suburban home that once felt like a gilded cage into a cozy downtown apartment that was all my own. With the hefty divorce settlement and my renewed focus on work, I was building a new life for myself from the ashes of my shattered marriage. It felt incredible to stand on my own 2 feet again, no longer weighed down by the constant anxiety and heartbreak of Nolan's infidelity. I was finally free. Of course, there were still tough days when the anger and hurt would bubble back up unexpectedly. Like the morning I ran into Nolan at a cafe near my new place, I just ordered my usual soy latte when that all-too-familiar voice made me freeze. "Lila, is that you?" I turned slowly to see him sitting at a corner table, looking unbearably pathetic in a rumpled suit and day-old stubble. The light had gone out of his eyes, leaving them dull and haunted. Part of me wanted to keep walking, to pretend I hadn't seen the sad shell of a man he'd become, but another part felt compelled to face him, to confirm just how far he'd fallen from grace. "Nolan," I said flatly, clutching my coffee cup. "Fancy meeting you here." He opened his mouth as if to say something, then seemed to think better of it. An awkward silence stretched between us, thick with unspoken history. How are you doing?" he finally managed, rubbing the back of his neck anxiously. I gave a nonchalant shrug. "I'm good, actually. Really good. Teaching keeps me busy, and I've been exploring some fun hobbies in my free time." That's great, Lila. I'm happy for you." His voice was subdued, defeated. We both knew I was lying through my teeth. I was more than just good. I was thriving, flourishing in the aftermath of shedding him from my life. Nolan, on the other hand? Well, one look at his haggard face and slumped shoulders told the whole story. Losing his fancy job, his status, his money, and his mistress in one fell swoop had clearly broken something inside him. Part of me felt a pang of pity, but the rest of me remained coldly indifferent, even satisfied to see the pathetic, sniveling man he'd become. This was the price he paid for his sickening betrayal. Let it be a hard lesson etched into his bones. As I turned to leave, coffee in hand, Nolan reached out as if to stop me. "Lila, wait." His voice cracked with desperation. "I'm so sorry. For everything. You didn't deserve any of that pain I caused you. I was a stupid, selfish bastard, and I'll regret it until the day I die." I paused, letting his words hang heavy in the air between us. Once upon a time I might have accepted that apology, might have even felt the sting of tears. But now, those useless words just rolled off me like water off a duck's back. We were far past the point of making amends. Fixing him with a cool, appraising stare, I simply said, "I know you are, and I truly don't care anymore, Nolan. That's the beautiful part." I left him gaping after me, mouth opening and closing like a landed fish, as I strode out of the cafe with my head held high. No more tears, no more anger, just the delicious sense of closure after claiming my long-overdue justice. That poison chapter of my life was finally, blessedly, over. And as I stepped out into the brisk morning air, breathing in the crispness of my newfound freedom, I felt an overwhelming sense of lightness washing over me. The cheating liar who'd once crushed my heart under his heel was now powerless. I'd conquered the demons of betrayal through the sweetest revenge imaginable, breaking the cycle and choosing to live well instead of being consumed by hatred. With a faint smile playing on my lips, I pressed on down the sidewalk, eagerly ready to embrace this new and infinitely brighter path laid out before me.